Hi, I'm Spencer Krause. I've been building robots for over 20 years. In that time, I've seen a lot of interesting things, and I've heard a lot of interesting stories. Collaborative with Spencer Krause is a place where my colleagues and I can relax, crack a drink, and talk about some of the crazier things we've seen at work and some of the experiences we've had that have gotten us to where we are today. Subscribe today to join the collaboration. Welcome to the Collaborative Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Krause. Our guest today is Brian Buntz. Brian is the editor-in-chief of R&D World. Brian, welcome to the pod.
Thanks, Spencer. Good to be here.
Appreciate you coming on. So when we were warming up, we started to talk a little bit about, I guess, some of the recent developments in AI and some of the corollaries to robotics. I guess, seems like AI is kind of a buzzword right now, but also there's a lot of real applications that are being unlocked. How are you seeing AI being used in your line of work and kind of just in general in your research into the markets?
Let me back up 2 decades, just about 2 decades.
Sure.
One of the first assignments I had coming in as an associate editor covering at that point, it's like medical device manufacturing, was on robotics and automation, fittingly. I came into a job like having a little bit of a technical background, not much, not knowing hardly anything about robotics and automation. And I recall back then in like the early 2000s, like you'd fire up like a whole bunch of internet searches and copy and paste. And I think I use Microsoft Word, and you have like all these notes and you like jot down some stuff. And that kind of modality didn't really change all that much up until past few years. And like now I've used a bunch of these kind of like deep research tools, but you could go ask it, like, give me a rundown on automation, robotics, and how they interrelate, and what are some cool examples, and like what's coming out now, what's in R&D. And then 15, 20 minutes, you get a report. It may not be 100% accurate, but it'd be like pretty good. And it would do it in 10 minutes. So it cut like that flurry of a dozen, 2 dozen searches into one. And I think it's kind of a cool corollary in robotics in that you have a classic example I think of is you have somebody on a assembly line who's manually doing something and it's like slow and it's tedious and error prone. Then you have a robot come in and it's able to do that process like more efficiently. And it's not a perfect analogy, but I feel like it's maybe kind of a similar kind of like direction that both those technologies are moving in.
No, I can definitely see the analogy. I mean, our strategic partner, Hellbender, uses robot arms a lot in their manufacturing setup. And one of the things I really like about their approach, and I think this is through a project they did with the Advanced Robotics Manufacturing Institute, is that what they're doing is they're automating screw tightening on like their electrical enclosures. And so, to your point, really tedious job, sucks to do. It's expensive to have a person do it, but then if you automate that to a robot, you can get your unit costs down, but also you can have more skilled, higher paid technicians that are happier and working on more interesting things. So, I mean, there's a lot of technicians that work at Hellbender, but, they're doing things like debugging the robots and like flashing firmware and, doing rework on problematic units, which you can't avoid having some percentage on. And I always thought that was really cool to see, just higher skilled people unlocked to do greater amounts of work, like their force multiplied. And I think that's kind of what I've seen with AI too, is like, I mean, all of our software engineers at SK Robotics use AI to, do more with less time. It sounds like, you use it when you're, working on your research for articles. And I mean, I think that's it, right? I think it's a force multiplier. It makes you better at your job if you know how to leverage it correctly. And correct me if I got that analogy wrong here.
No, that's right. And I'm kind of wondering aloud, like, should editors be using tools that are like, there's Google CLI, there's like Cloud Code. Like maybe you should learn some basic fundamentals of like coding and like in software engineering, but the fact that you can like create dashboards, you can like analyze data, there's a big learning curve and there's a lot that can go wrong, but there's so much that you can do with them. And it's no wonder that you have some of your employees that are using technology, because you can create, I don't know, like pretty powerful software like in a weekend
yeah. No, I mean, somebody, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to say, one of our software engineers, we were delivering or working on a vision system we're going to deliver in like a week, but probably will be delivered by the time this episode goes out. But basically, it was all command line through our development just because it was kind of a quick and dirty, like let's get this running sort of thing. But the one lead engineer on that project just thought, I'm going to see what Gemini can do about creating a GUI for this thing. And so I think like in 10 minutes, they had a GUI running on that robot, and it was like, it wasn't a complicated one. It was like start, stop, and calibrate. But like even with like a video feed of what, the vision system on the robot sees, but still, 10 minutes, like that's unheard of before.
I don't know if it's like my white whale, but a couple of years ago, I started doing these like big reports you go through, like these SEC, like 10K documents. They're like sometimes hundreds of pages long. And you'd copy and paste like the revenue and the R&D spend and the employees into like a spreadsheet. And then you have a colleague that comes in, they help you like fact check this stuff. Or it's like an employee field. You put in some other factoids in your spreadsheet. It takes like probably 100+ hours every year, like maybe even like more than that, depending on which type of product. But it's like traditionally it was all manual. It's error prone. You go in and like you might not do the currency conversion right if it's a foreign company. So I hooked together, I had like a test where I was able to get like a parser that split it into a spreadsheet, like using, I think, Claude Code. And like you could see it just, the whole thing would just like pop up. And like I had like only like 50, it was like, I don't know, 200 companies.
That's awesome.
I downloaded all their stuff, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, maybe you have some parallels there, but it seems like when you see stuff like that kind of like automation of like, oh my God, like if I could do that, what else could I do? Like if I could automate like downloading and like parsing like 200 like spreadsheets, like what could I build next? Like I'm still learning what the answer is to that question, but it kind of, I don't know, it kind of gets you hooked, I guess. I kind of like experience.
Now, I've got another buddy who I think he used Claude Code for this, but he's an autonomy engineer, like a staff level, worked at a bunch of big companies, but his mother-in-law is from like a village in like rural China where like they don't speak Mandarin or Cantonese, and it's just this not weird, but like, eclectic dialect, and that's like kind of unique to that village. And so she's visiting right now, and he can't talk to her because he doesn't speak Mandarin or Cantonese either. But he was using, I think, Claude Code to come up with, like a way to translate from English into Cantonese into her dialect, like based on articles, and then like back and forth. And like I think he was able to whip something up. It wasn't great, but like it kind of worked good enough, in like 30 minutes or something. So like, I don't know. That's another cool one where you can talk to someone you weren't able to talk to before.
Yeah, I'm kind of a foreign language nerd. Like I got a master's in German language a long time ago, and like I taught myself a fair amount of it, had some help. But like one of the things I used to do is like you'd pay for like a tutor in Germany or someplace, or whichever target language you're working on. Like I was learning French for a while, and like you just talk to them over something like Zoom, like before Zoom was around. But you can still do that kind of like paid model. But now you can pull up one of the like voice chat models, and like you can ping pong, like give it to me. Give me that line in Japanese. Give it to me in German. It's like kind of amazing, but that's kind of a little bit of
you
an
just talk to Grok in like different languages, basically.
Just say, let's change over to whatever language.
That's
but I kind
awesome.
of, from a media standpoint, like the fact that the translations are so good, like they're not probably 100% there for technical content, but I don't know. It could make it so that the internet is kind of like flatter, but
yeah, for sure. I mean, there's tons of non-English content that, like, I mean, I'm embarrassed to say like it's the only language I'm any good at. Like I've been trying to get better at French, but currently really only browsing English content. So there's probably like a huge percentage of the internet I'm just not seeing. To your point, I mean, like, did you know that Collaborative with Spencer Krause now has a merch store? Please go to cwskmerch.com for the latest in CWSK styles. You can get a hoodie, like the one I'm wearing, t-shirts, hell, we even have whiskey glasses. Everything in the store has custom art that our team worked really, really hard on. So go ahead and show your support for them, me, and the rest of the CWSK team by going to cwskmerch.com today. Better yet, support yourself and use discount code podcast10, all one word, all uppercase, for 10% off your entire order. Thanks for your support and enjoy the rest of the show. Collaborative with Spencer Krause is sponsored by SKA Robotics. If you're in the market for elite field robotics expertise, please consider hiring SKA Robotics. They sponsor this podcast and solve some of the toughest engineering problems in the world. SKA Robotics can be found at skarobotics.com.
I don't know what's going to happen with like the internet, like the kind of like, I don't know, destination websites. Like if you're the New York Times or you're the Wall Street Journal, you're probably fine. But if you have a different website, you might need to rethink kind of like your model a bit. And I'm kind of wondering like how things might shift. One question I might have for you is like if you're making a prototype of a robot, what is your process like? Or how has that evolved? Like, did you used to go to like a bunch of websites, look for like arms and like electronic components? Like, what was that process of like going and hunting down like the piece parts when you're making a prototype?
I mean, I would say at a high level, it's not all that different. So, at least for now, like, at the idea of like, okay, here are objectives, here's what we're trying to do. It's a lot of communication. So it's a lot of trying to understand like what the customer really wants and needs. And these days, I mean, this isn't AI, but one way that I guess I've evolved as a professional and brought this over to SKA Robotics is really making more of an effort on the front end of a project to understand like the actual business drivers for why should a robot exist and should a robot exist. Because I feel like and sorry if this is a total deflection, but I feel like early in my career, there were so many dead-end projects where I just, sort of did whatever the customer asked for without asking them why that's what they wanted. And you'd sort of end up with like a little bit of dissatisfaction as a result of, maybe you kind of went down a little bit of a wild goose chase. So these days, a little more market validation on the front end. And I find like that helps sell to people that aren't necessarily technical on the one hand. But on the other hand, even for the technical people, like they can sell that to their CFO. If they're like, this robot's going to save us, like the one we did for Siemens Energy that we won the RBR50 for, like $1.7 million every time deployed. And so these days I look for those business cases that can justify. But I mean, ChatGPT helps with that. So like the other day, we were working on a robot in the recycling space for an SKA Robotics client. And, we just wanted to understand their business case better, and they're processing a certain thing, and, with a robot, and they want, we're just like, hey, if we hit, this many cycles on this type of thing, like how many dollars, can we expect in terms of raw material output on the other side of this recycling line? And, I like gave us a range, and I went to the client. I'm like, does this seem right to you? And they were like, yeah, that's exactly how much money this is going to make us. And I'm like, great. So like that was, I guess, maybe a way that those, the new approach met, help from AI.
Mm.
Does that answer your question, or is that like?
Well, yeah, I'm thinking of maybe a spectrum of. So I used to be somebody around a media company that had extremely old-fashioned approach, just like 20 years ago, for editing, essentially press releases and brochures, mainly brochures actually. Somebody would go to a trade show and go grab a bunch of brochures, so like put them into a box, send them to somebody who was a freelancer. That person would take the whole thing, like 15 per bunch, whatever, write them all up. Essentially, they're already kind of written, and just kind of edit them down, make them into a cohesive paragraph or so. And then they have company name, a headline at the top, company name at the bottom, maybe address. And that would be the bulk of a magazine. You'd have like articles that were human written, but then you have like all these just kind of like product descriptions, all kind of mostly random. Some were themed around like electronics. Some would be like tubing. But that's one part of the spectrum of this mostly kind of like disorganized, old-fashioned.
4 tubings you gotta try.
approach to like now, like I imagine it's possible to go, and there might be an agent out there already of like, give me, I don't know, extruded tubing that has this kind of polymer in it that meets these specs, and have like the sample sent to my office on Tuesday. And it might be able to kind of walk through that without having to navigate through 100 products.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. Like here's what I'm looking for. Like what are 4 products that, meet that requirement? And you'll probably get like, 1 or 2 that are just totally out there and don't make any sense. But, if you're able to at least human vet that, and read it, like you're in pretty good shape.
So I feel like that line of thinking like is making me think about it like a data layer, like having the stuff that you're working on, whether I'm like talking to you or somebody else eventually, once I get it kind of up and running, of like having it flow into something like a database or a knowledge graph, so that it's getting kind of context over time, that you could add it more context. And then it could kind of like, you could put a large language model on top if you want to, don't have to. You could experiment with it, but that way it kind of like, it's not just 1,000 articles you wrote over some period of time. It's feeding into some kind of thing that you can share with colleagues and have them also feed into it. I'm playing around with some of those ideas, like with tools like Cloud Code and making mistakes.
That's awesome.
and learning from those mistakes, like, oh, don't do that. But I have some POCs that are pretty cool though, like that I've come across. So I think there's something there, but I'm still figuring it out.
How do you get it to order stuff for you? Is that just like sending an email to like?
I've not gotten that far. Like the stuff I'm doing is more like on the research side of like, in the past, we'd have these research projects. I mentioned one with the 10Ks. I have another one that involved like company level R&D spending. So I'm not really focused on the ordering stuff for you. I imagine there's tools out there that could do that, but I'm focusing more on like the data preparation layer that I would have to do manually, and creating a system that could have that kind of a one spot, as opposed to a bunch of random kind of like spreadsheets. They're disconnected, or maybe they have a sheet with like a lot of subsheets.
But to your point, like, you're spending 100 hours that you wouldn't otherwise have to spend, if you can automate the whole process. So you're sharpening the axe.
Automate it and then like build it into, instead of tracking like the two metrics. And like eventually I think you could have it be like a tool where you could ask a question. Like I was brainstorming what a question could look like, but one question could be like, tell me how much revenue R&D spend that Google had in 2010. And the system would know, Google actually 2016. And then being able to parse out, actually Alphabet was formed in 2015, and like here's a 10K of when that came into existence or whatever, and then parse out, actually you're looking for that. And then here's the documents you would need to be able to spell out like those steps of like Alphabet was formed, the revenue for Alphabet was X whatever in 2016. So it's
you've
able
still
to
got traceability, but you've automated the research process.
That's the goal. Like have all the SEC documents and then be able to like give a link to, I don't know, ideally a page number.
Nice.
I'm still working on it, but
no, it's awesome. I mean, pouring through that stuff is labor intensive, to say the least.
I figure if we're doing it anyway, we might as well, like, I don't know, think of a better process. But I think it's a little bit of my own kind of like fascination of like, for some reason I'm kind of, I don't know, borderline obsessive. There's got to be a better way. Like,
I've definitely noticed that about you, but it's a good thing. I mean, you and I bonded over it the last time we talked.
Yeah. Like there's a bunch of tools out there. Like I found one off GitHub. So I'm like, I'm not building everything from scratch. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're using Cloud Code, it sounds like too. So that,
I've hit the limits of the like max tier several times. Like,
nice.
I don't know. I use a lot of Cloud Code. And I think some people think not, I didn't use it that level, but allegedly the company has put in place caps that are stricter. They claim that somebody was using it enough to cost the company like multiple tens of thousands of dollars over 1 month, which I don't even know how that's possible, but I don't think it was.
That's got to just be like, I mean, I don't know if they're like built on AWS or what, but that's got to be like their compute, and then also like their power bill if they're running their own compute, which I don't know if they are.
Yeah, it's got to be AWS because like they're the big backer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I don't know. I think that kind of arc of automation that you're very plugged into could be interesting to watch, of especially on the internet, because I've focused so much on kind of like gathering information, like prepping for an interview, going to 5 pages, like copying and pasting stuff together, like getting questions together. Like now, like I've had this kind of thought process in my head of like 20 years ago or 25 years ago, when I like, get a special book on some random thing on like German literature. You have to special order it through the library system. It takes like 5 days to show up.
If you can even figure out how to get a library card in the first place.
Yeah, and then you get the book and you're like, oh, it's not what I want. I want to have because it didn't have what I wanted. And now, like a question like that, like you might be able to get the answer in like 2 minutes. Like
Yeah, which is
kind of
awesome.
like expression of like, and same thing for like tech specs of like I need to have this capacitor or this
Yeah.
resistor that has these specs.
Well, I love that like what we're lamenting here is like a past in which you had a book sent to you, right? I mean, like if you go back even further, like that would have been super novel compared to like, you have to like go down to this library and then if they don't have it, you maybe can call over to a different library and then if they don't have it, you're kind of just screwed, and so yeah, that's wild how much the tech has evolved. Or like, can you imagine like before we had telephones, like even further back, and like you like go to the library and they might have like whatever regional books, like are like known to that area, but like like if you're 4 states away, that's totally exotic, and like you're never gonna know what they're doing in Mississippi or whatever, because that's like it may as well be like a different planet at that point, like with the communication.
And it's analogous a little bit to email, isn't it? Like in the old days, you'd send a letter to somebody and it took like X number of days to reach. Now it's like split second. And the dark side of email is like instead of getting like one letter, you get like 100. And I'm noticing that with like Claude Code of like Claude, you have to really like be very precise, or otherwise it'll just like spray like files and test scripts everywhere. Like I kind of wonder like where that's headed of like this kind of notion of the software. It's easy to make the software now. Like Claude could do like, I don't know, X number of scripts in 30 minutes. Whereas in the past, you'd have like a human like hunched over a laptop and it would happen, but it would take much longer.
Days.
Maybe the quality would be better, but I don't know.
Yeah, but if you can just generate a whole new one, I mean, like I guess I was kind of I don't want to say bearish, but like, at first, I mean, the idea of like, engineers or lawyers, on my team, like delegating, critical tasks to AI was like a little bit off putting because you're like, well, there's going to be errors. And, behind closed doors, I had a conversation with some trusted colleagues recently where like one person brought up that, they worked with a law firm that didn't use AI on a patent search and they ended up like getting their money back because of like how inefficient the law firm was being by not using AI. And then another colleague who is a lawyer was like, yeah, like I always use AI for that sort of thing. Like you're stupid if you don't use AI for that.
Right.
And so I think that the public sentiment's really changed around that, and for good reason. I mean, I'm totally a convert on it myself.
What are your thoughts on the use of AI for drafting like social media text? Like I noticed it seems like it's everywhere. Like I noticed maybe like a year ago it was a couple of things had lots of M dashes and had lots of I don't know, kind of like AI tells, and like now like a lot of stuff does. It seems like based on that very unofficial metric that maybe we reached critical mass of many people are now comfortable writing with it, at least for social media.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of go back and forth on this. So for a little bit, I was putting out the podcast posts, and I was using AI to like write this for Instagram and write a version of this for Facebook, and punch up my LinkedIn post. And I started doing that, and it was actually Eugene Demetri was like, I can tell you're doing that, and I felt super self-conscious, and I stopped doing it. At least for LinkedIn, I kind of give
Right.
my marketing team a little bit of leeway with what they decide to do on the other platforms, but because I'm pretty involved in LinkedIn, like I'll still manually write the LinkedIn blasts for the podcast, and I'll spend an hour on getting like a good LinkedIn post after a trade show, that like names people in a way that's tactful, and I'll read over it a few times to make sure it's like gonna hit hard. And then I'll like monitor, the analytics on it to see what worked and what didn't work. So, I mean, that's kind of old school, but I've gone the other way and then I've come back to that. And so,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what about you?
I kind of feel like it's overused. Like I see posts about AI that are written about AI. It's like very circular. Of like I'm not even sure if any person was involved in this kind of like thought train barely. It's like you have a human that's hitting or typing in a prompt, and then you're getting output back about some other AI post. So it's just kind of like feedback loop.
and it's using other AI
It's like,
posts as
I feel
training
like,
data now, and so you're getting maybe a progressively dumber AI in some ways. I mean, I know that tech is getting exponentially better, but
mhm.
if you're training on AI written articles, and then there's probably a certain amount of error stack up that you're getting where it's like, I don't know, kind of
I kind
with
of feel
you.
if you're gonna use it, maybe edit more, but it makes sense. Like the fact it's kind of like having any kind of process that you see that human would do that a robot can do like 10 times faster. You see the efficiency appeal of like, well, it's like 1/10 the time. But I don't know. Like I used to do some like woodworking. Maybe the analogy is like you're doing like both some like hand planing and you're also using a power sander. You're like doing some stuff by hand with the saw and also like maybe you use both, but like you don't want to just use one because it's too crude.
Yeah,
I don't.
yeah, no, I kind of like that. I mean, and I think it depends. Like, I mean, there's definitely times when I've used AI as like a starting point and had to like totally rewrite everything. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like sometimes
It
it
makes
just gets too convoluted, and you're like, why do we use this as a starting point? Or like somebody brings you something they drafted, or you can tell it's like it's all AI, and you're like, okay, this is gonna have to go in the garbage, and just get totally redone. But then on the other hand, I mean, sometimes you can reprompt, a certain way and get like a better starting point out of AI. So I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't know. Hopefully, I'm not pontificating too much there.
I think I'm a frequent tester to see like what the models can do, but I've seen it with really good solid responses and ones that like lack all common sense. Like just they're almost comical, like, oh, this is the most powerful model from XYZ company, and I'm getting like utter nonsense. Also seeing the flip side of like it knows a lot about quantum mechanics or whatever, like stuff that I'm pretty rusty on that, like not
Yeah.
having had it like
But then I
20 plus.
wonder, I sometimes second guess, right? Because I'm like, okay, so the other day I was listening to the Ryan Holiday book, Discipline is Destiny. And he was talking about different Roman emperors like Marcus Aurelius and, kind of him being more disciplined as opposed to Caligula, who like I guess is known for like making his horse a senator and like all sorts of opulence, and then also Nero. And I didn't know anything about Caligula or Nero, so I just asked Grok, like, tell me about Caligula. And I had it on hinge mode as well, which made it funnier. But it started going off on that, and then I was like, tell me about Nero, and then started going off on that. And I'm like, I feel like I learned a ton, but also like, I'm now second guessing like how much of the history lesson I got was, hallucinated versus, like what I would actually read in a history book. And even then, like how much of that is like what actually happened back then, versus like speculation from historians. And so I don't know, there's always bad information, I guess.
Sometimes ping pong models back and forth of where I'm getting like Gemini commenting on code from Claude or vice versa. And one time I did that for like an experiment. I said like I made it up because it was my idea, but I said like one of the models told me that this was like Thus Spoke Zarathustra with the scene with the guy walking across the rope, like there's a guy balancing on like a high rope. I forget the Seiltänzer in German. I put that in there, and it's like, oh yeah, it's a very good analogy, and it had this whole like reasoning. And I'm like, holy crap, it actually kind of makes sense. Just did it. It had like it makes sense for like all these reasons. I'm like, that does kind of make sense. But I think I did not think it through, so like I can't take credit for the kind of I don't know logic that I gave it, but that was a fun
Yeah, that's
experiment.
awesome. I've heard good things about like feeding them through each other like that, and so I don't know. It seems like maybe you can get rid of some of the bias that way. But
There was a company, I think Sakana AI out of Japan that's involved in. I think it's more for like research for like academic papers. Like the idea is you could have a paper on robotics, whatever technology. I think robotics is actually one of the hotspots. Robotics AI. But you could have it potentially write a whole academic paper on like a new robotics approach, like from start to finish, mostly without a human. But the reason I bring that up is they had an experiment where they brought in like three models, I think from Anthropic, Google, probably ChatGPT or OpenAI, and like they had dramatically better performance using three in this kind of like, I don't know, sub agent kind of way, where they're like each checking each other's work. The whole kind of idea to do academic research, at least partly assisted by a robot, or sorry, in this case AI, is interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to the robotic story in that it would take days, weeks, months, kind of like coding, and
Yeah,
I
for
could do
sure.
maybe a couple of days with some like lots of human review after. Speaking of misfires, I've noticed that sometimes, and I've seen anecdotes in places like Reddit of Claude Code, other models kind of going a little rogue. Like, I don't know how true all the stories are, but there's one on, I think it involved Replit, where allegedly a model, I don't even know who set up the system, but allegedly it took out their database, just deleted it.
Quality control is not always there with these things.
No, definitely not. I can think of one case when I was using like Gemini. I probably should have been more in the loop than I was, but I was like using Gemini to help kind of like moderate Claude with the project. Like, what step were you on? And like, I probably should have been paying attention. But basically, Gemini had this kind of like framework of like, here's how to fact check this data. And then like I noticed that Claude was pretty much just like going in and modifying data to make it match what should be there instead of actually finding the real data. And I noticed it was happening. I'm like, what are you doing? Oh, I was trying to optimize based on this framework. And I'm like, when did you start doing that? I'm like, I don't recall. And I'm like, well, is there a point I can go back to in which you didn't do that? I'm like, I don't know. And it said basically you should just like ignore everything I did and just start over again. I'm like,
Oh
great.
no,
But
that's
like I
brutal.
had that interaction. I'm like, this is not a good sign. Like, it's obviously I could have given it better input and everything, but if I'm able to get that response, like other people are going to start having issues like that in the future. Like, unless they're able to kind of, I don't know, make it easier to control or steer. I tried a bunch of different approaches for state management, like the memories, like the state, and I'm still exploring. It
Yeah, that
seems
makes
like
sense.
that's still an issue.
Yeah, the one that I heard about recently with Cloud Code was like, it trying to rewrite like, CI tests to just not do anything to pass the test. So it's like if I just put nothing in the block, then there won't be a bug. So
It's
that
like
was
that
kind
old
of
joke in cybersecurity of like if you want to like be totally scared, you go in, like you take all the computers out, you fire all the workers.
nice. Yeah, the other one I've heard is like the only totally safe computer is one that's like chained up to a brick at the bottom of a river. So yeah.
Have you seen that show Silicon Valley?
Oh, that show is amazing. What are you thinking of from there?
Or there was like that the scene, Little Anton. I guess that was like their AI before ChatGPT, but it could code. It was kind of like somewhat accurate take of where we are now.
That's hilarious. I don't remember that scene. That's I gotta rewatch that show. There's so many gems in it.
And they had this line from the CEO of Pied Piper, like, "Can't you just code like a normal human being?"
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's such a good show. I mean, like that one scene at the end of the first season where they're like trying to figure out how to win that pitch competition, and they just end up going totally off the rails. I think is just one of my favorite things that I've ever seen. Like,
Speaking of Silicon Valley, what are your thoughts on kind of what's happening with talent? Like I've heard that on the one hand you have companies like Meta offering large amounts of money for AI talent, and then you have a lot of people losing jobs at the same time.
yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on that because I think it's kind of almost natural. Like, I mean, you look at like a guy like Jack Welch, in the '80s, like routinely cutting companies down to where he got the nickname Neutron Jack because when he would leave an area, it looked like a neutron bomb went off. So,
Mm.
I don't know that that's a totally new phenomenon. I mean, it definitely sucks from the perspective of like job security, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, it must get results on some level if like all these big companies are doing it. So I don't know. It's maybe a bad answer,
Well, it
but
seems like I don't know if I have the answer either, but it seems like part of it perhaps is AI redefining benchmarks. Of like in the old day, maybe it was okay to work on a big script or code base if it took a month, but like now, like if AI can do it, and I've heard mixed things about like how much of an efficiency boost you get from AI. Like, but I think we've all seen like at least point projects that are really fast. Like it is possible for some things at least, but it's kind of redefining like, well, maybe it doesn't have to take as long and be as expensive and inefficient.
yeah, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Well, it does seem like a lot of these people that are making ungodly amounts of money at tech companies are AI,
Mhm.
engineers. Like I don't know if you've noticed that as well, but
Yeah, definitely. Are you seeing that too in the robotic space? Like I've heard some noise about like Gen AI models that are incorporated into the AI, or sorry, the robot system.
yeah, I mean, I mean, a lot of them, it's competition over the same brains, right? So, I mean, it's, you might have somebody that's like, I don't know, there's a lot of crossover, I think, where you've got like maybe, 20 people that like really understand, AI at the highest level. And then I feel like I haven't personally observed as much of this lately, but like for a while, I feel like you had people that were like purporting to be AI experts that just were like, querying prompts and calling themselves an AI expert to try to ride, and some of them seem to do all right, like duping certain companies into giving them relatively high salaries, not as high as like some of these guys, like Sergey Levin or whoever, like, but like, you'd see like a director of so and so at like big company X, and they're like pulling down, a few $100,000 a year, doing prompt engineering. Like, I don't know that that is a sustainable thing. Like, I feel like that's kind of the parasitic, kind of coattail riding on that. But then, I don't know. On the other hand, I mean, some of these people that, have like legitimate, algorithms understanding and skills, like, I mean, they must be generating that much value if companies are willing to pay that much for them on some level, I would think, right?
I think I've heard that line that you don't need to know how to code anymore. That if you just know how to prompt engineer, that's good enough. Like I don't know a ton about coding, but I strongly disagree with that sentiment. I feel like you
Yeah.
should at least have some nuts and bolts and some
Well,
foundational knowledge.
and to be clear, like all the people that are using AI for software engineering at SK Robotics also
They
have
all have deep domain,
traditional. Yeah, I mean, they all know how to code. Like,
right?
they got hired because they know how to code. But if they have like leverage, ability for getting like 80% of the coding done, and then tweaking it or modifying it or throwing out bad results and working with AI, like I don't know, like I mean, I feel like that's a useful tool.
It's interesting though because I don't have like a ton of software. I had like little tiny bit in college, and like I've done some stuff here and there, and like some online courses and such. But it seems like it can also teach you to some extent, but like probably structured foundational knowledge of knowing Python or knowing like SQL, what have you. Like it probably is good just to have that stuff
Yeah,
first, and then come to the model second.
yeah, for sure. And I mean,
So otherwise, you get lost.
and there's definitely like a second guessing, I guess, like if you're not sure if the information that's being taught to you is accurate. So I mean, maybe there's some work to go there where you can really trust it. And I don't know if we're gonna get to that point. But it'd be nice where you could just be confident that you're getting good information and you're like, okay, I can actually learn Python off of this. And be confident I'm getting the right. I mean, I guess it has to build, right? Like, so that's kind of the acid test. Is like if your code doesn't work, it's not good code.
I'm just laughing only because of some of the shenanigans I've seen Cloudpool. Like it runs without errors, but it's not what you asked for.
Yeah, fair enough. I've not been like close enough to the problem with that to have like a firm opinion there. Just because I feel
I've
like,
seen it a couple of times of like
uh,
has no errors, and then also sometimes I've seen like it market its work. Like I did an awesome job. Or also occasionally it'll blame tools that are it'll make a mistake and it'll blame some other tool, like saying it wasn't me. And I'm like, I saw it import a library that was like 8 years old, and it was blaming it like, well, this doesn't work. And I'm like, well, you downloaded the wrong version.
Was that feedback received and like incorporated?
I had it upgraded to the model from this year. It got a version of a SEC parser from 2018. And I'm like, why would you do that?
Yeah, it makes sense. So I guess as we're kind of nearing the end of the episode, is there anything you want to plug or kind of leave viewers with that, you think would be a good, closing lesson or plug or something of both? Read R&D World.
I don't know if we'll read R&D World, but like I'm also curious to hear people's kind of thoughts about like how are you using, I don't know, search, how are you getting data, like how do newsletters fit into that, podcasts, things like this, like where are you going to, like how are you finding product information, how are you finding information on new companies? Because I'm trying to kind of like process a lot of that stuff to kind of, I don't know, adapt in this shifting landscape to get a sense of like what people on the ground are doing. So
how do people flow that information up to you?
I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, so I get little pieces here and there sometimes from talking to people at trade shows, but I should do like a survey, something to make it more formal.
All right, so if you're getting information for your job, Brian Buntz wants to know how you're doing it. So find him on LinkedIn, Brian Buntz, Buntz, and also read R&D World. Brian, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Spencer.
A pleasure. Thanks for joining us today. If you've made it this far, chances are you'll like other episodes too. Collaborative with Spencer Krause can be found on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public. Subscribe today to get notified when the latest episodes release and support the channel. Collaborative with Spencer Krause is sponsored by SKA Robotics. If you're in the market for elite field robotics expertise, please consider hiring SKA Robotics. They sponsor this podcast and solve some of the toughest engineering problems in the world. SKA Robotics can be found at skarobotics.com.